Hi everybody. I want to talk about sexual abuse in marriage, specifically men's violence towards women. Now, in this country, the marriage certificate to a great extent has been used as a license to abuse. Most glaring example is that until 1991 there were no laws in this country making marital rape a crime. Sexual violence in general, if they were perpetrated against strangers, would be prosecuted. But if the victim is a spouse, it is often disregarded. And think about this. In 2018, the UK government conducted a survey that found that 1 in 4 Britons do not believe that it is possible for a man to rape his wife. 25%. Of that number, 16% of those between 16 and 24 believe the same thing. On a world scale, 37 countries do not have laws against marital rape. So sexual violence happens in marriages because men grow up in cultures that make it okay. Now this term sexual violence is an umbrella term. It involves a wide variety of behaviors that include rape, sexual violations that are physical, verbal, visual, without consent, and either by coercion or assault. Sexual violence is about power and control. I recently read about a guy who raped his wife on their wedding night. Not because sex wasn't available, but because he wanted to stamp his authority on the marriage from the outset. Power and control. One of the problems that we have in dealing with sexual abuse in marriage is that victims don't always recognize it for what it is. Sexual abuse is not always physical. Coercion is not always aggressive or violent. They may not know what a healthy sexual relationship is supposed to be. They may simply believe that they are fulfilling their conjugal obligations when they're actually submitting to intimidation, bullying, unreasonable demands, guilt tripping. And where the abuse is violent and obvious, shame will often keep the victims in isolated silence. Now, another disturbing statistic is that women in faith communities are just as likely to be abused as women in the general population. And what makes it worse within the church is that abusers will often use bad theology as well as male privilege in order to perpetrate sexual violence, quoting those passages about headship and submission, misquoting and misapplying Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 7 about couples not depriving one another. And they will use that in order to claim sex on demand. But that was so far from what Paul was trying to get across. Paul was simply making the point that couples need to be intentional about nurturing the health of their relationship. This idea that men can't rape their wives, it has its root in 17th century jurisprudence. It was written into English law at a time when women were considered to be the property of their husbands. But while the law has changed, eventually, some of those underlying ideas still perpetuate, as evidenced by the 2018 survey. These kind of ideas, especially in the church, demonstrate a shocking lack of understanding of what sexual union is supposed to be. The sexual union is supposed to be a beautiful act. It is supposed to connote the covenant sign of marriage. When couples have sex with one another, they are renewing, or supposed to be renewing, their marital vows to love one another unconditionally. So sexual violence and sexual abuse fundamentally violate the whole purpose of sexual union. Here's the thing. Just because you have a marriage certificate doesn't make everything okay. Not everything goes. Ellen White makes the point that base passions can be present in the marriage as well as outside of it. Rape is rape, regardless of the relationship between the rapist and the victim. And men who rape women are criminals who ought to be in jail. Now, if you are a victim of sexual violence, you need to get help. Summon up all the courage that you can find and overcome your fear. Overcome whatever embarrassment you feel and talk to somebody that you trust. call one of the organizations listed at the end of this video, but don't suffer in silence. Now, it's possible that you're in a marriage where you're not sure whether or not you are being sexually abused because of the subtle nature of the abuse. Well, if that's the case, you need to educate yourself to find out what a healthy sexual relationship is so that you can recognize the counterfeit. But realize this: you are not a body to be used. You are a person to be loved. God's counsel to husbands through the Apostle Paul, he says, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Love your wives just as Christ loved the church. Now, as a church community, we have a responsibility to shine a light on abuse. We have a responsibility to break through the taboos that prevent us from talking about these issues. We have a responsibility to hold up the ideals so that young and old can see what they should be aspiring to. We have a responsibility to create this safe environment so that those who are suffering from abuse can feel confident to come in the belief that they're going to get the help and assistance that they need. So as a church, let us step up for the vulnerable. And may God give us the wisdom and the courage to call out abuse in all its forms so that we can become the community that he wants us to be. May God bless you.